Yeah. What's going on, folks? Appreciate you for tuning in again. And we're going to get right into it because, that's what I like to do. I'm about that action. The Radiant Path, moving with gratitude and grace. Um, just, these are two principles that will save your life and just, things that I constantly remind myself on a daily basis throughout the day, just living with gratitude and grace. Defining the core pillars. Before looking at the effects, we must understand these two forces as spiritual muscles rather than just emotions. Gratitude, the conscious acknowledgement of the abundance already present. It is a bridge between the human experience and source. So, yeah, I look at gratitude as, waking up in the morning and having that making that conscious decision that I am grateful for the present moment, the ability to just wake up, be alive, and have the ability to choose the path that I'm going to move forward on. um yeah, just again that conscious decision of knowing that you have that connection to the present moment and to the divine source. Grace, the ability to remain unruffled by the friction of life. It is unmerited favor, both giving it to others and allowing ourselves to receive it when we stumble. So yeah, I look at grace as you know maybe you had a maybe you have an issue with a parent, um, uh, being upset with them for a decision that they made, but just understanding that you know they are making decisions as best they can, and you have to be able to give them space to be themselves. Say you have a coworker who's just getting on your nerves and just doesn't really know how to act around you, but you know you give them that grace, to understand that, yeah, I may be putting up with them in this moment, but there was a time when somebody was putting up with me, and just allowing me to be in their space. So just understanding that that's something that goes both ways. All right, the spiritual shift from scarcity to abundance. Let's make this a little bigger. So yeah, when you move through life with gratitude, your spiritual frequency undergoes a fundamental shift. Vibrational alignment. Gratitude acts as a tuner. Instead of vibrating at the frequency of lack, fear, envy, or the feeling of not enough, you align with the frequency of plenty. So I can definitely relate to this. When I started, um, or what let's say when I started back getting into business, and just you know not working a 9 to 5 and just being all about my business and working for self, um, having to worry about money in the sense of investing in myself on a continuous basis, on a daily basis, having to spend money on myself in order to put myself in position to earn more money, while at the same time having to take care of bills and just everyday needs. Just that initial fear of you know believing in myself, and always being willing to invest in myself, and not being afraid of spending, putting my money where my mouth was. And once I got over that fear, and I kind of attune my frequency to that state of abundance, everything worked out for me. I always had people who were there to support me and give me, what I needed to get by, and just always keep it moving forward. So yeah, make sure you're aligning your frequency to that, state of abundance through gratitude. Dissolving the ego. The ego thrives on complaints and perceived injustices. Gratitude humbles the ego by acknowledging that our blessings often come from outside our limited efforts. So yeah, I know we all like to think that you know, that our success comes from our efforts, but um, that is, a piece of it. At the same time, once we settle in that state of gratitude, we always reflect on those that came before us that put building blocks in place for us to be successful, as well as the shoulders that we lean on a constant basis. There's definitely people that I depend on in order to be able to move how I move currently. So yeah, heighten intuition. By focusing on what is right, you clear the static of anxiety, making it easier to hear the still small voice of spiritual guidance. The mechanics of grace, non-resistant. If gratitude is the fuel, grace is a lubricant. It allows you to move through the world without getting stuck. The release of karmic weight. Moving with grace means practicing forgiveness to yourself and others. This prevents the accumulation of spiritual debt or resentment that weighs down the soul. So yeah, again, grace is that back and forth, that 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 thing that you offer to others, that is also offered to you. That that basically kind of state of love that we all share amongst each other that allows us to get by. That yeah, that's just sees what somebody else needs. That sees the divine in others. Yeah, divine flow. Grace is a recognition that you don't have to control everything. It is the spiritual equivalent of treading water rather than thrashing against the current. Compassion as a default. Grace allows you to see the divine spark in others. Even when they are at their most difficult, this dissolves the spiritual illusion of separation. Yeah, like I just mentioned, grace is that, allowance of you and you to be able to see, the God in others, um, and also allows them to see that state of being within you. All right, we're gonna skip that slide. And yeah, this is the end here. So, moving through life with gratitude and grace isn't about ignoring the darkness. It's about carrying a lamp that the darkness cannot extinguish. It transforms the mundane into the sacred, turning a simple walk into a pilgrimage. Gratitude is the wine for the soul. Go on and get drunk. Quote by Rumi. But yeah, appreciate you for tuning into this message. I hope that you remind yourself to move with gratitude and grace. First of all, for yourself, give yourself grace. Um, you know, in order to just allow yourself, the space to be who you need to be, to make the decisions you need to make, to be your best self. First for yourself, and then, for your loved ones. And once that grows, for strangers, for people you don't know. But yeah, just make sure you're putting your best foot forward, giving yourself love, and sharing that love with the collective. Peace.